Okay, I'm very privileged to be here today because I'm talking alongside people who I considered my mentors in my journey in software metrics. Jean-Marc Dejanet came to Australia in early 2000s to teach me about Cosmic. And Pekka Fasalis, sitting in the front row here, came to Australia also in the early 2000s to teach me about scope management. And these people were already considered experts in the industry, even in the early 2000s. So there's an enormous wealth of experience here today and tomorrow that you're going to be hearing from. Okay, I'd like to thank Francisco for doing an amazing job putting on this conference for today and tomorrow. It's my first time to Mexico, so I'm quite excited about that. And I'll just talk a little bit about ISBSG. It's a mouthful, International Software Benchmarking Standards Group. And please excuse me if I throw in a bit of slang, because I am Australian. And we shorten that to ice bags. So I will often just say ice bags instead of ISBSG throughout the presentation. And it's quite common to hear that throughout the industry. So the important thing about ice bags is it's an open database, which means you get all of the projects and you can look at each individual project and decide if that's a project that you want to be including in your comparison, whatever you're doing with that information, whether you're using it for benchmarking, whether you're using it for estimating, whatever. That's the important thing, that you can actually see the details of that project and every single project and decide whether you think, yep, that's something that I really think is a real project, or no, I think that's rubbish and I will exclude it. Okay, just a bit of a disclaimer that I am no statistics expert. I know a little bit about statistics, but really the way I'm using this information is more from what I consider just a common sense approach. And I do have quite a lot of numbers in this presentation because that is what people actually relate to, numbers. So I hope everyone's had a coffee because you're going to have to stay awake. Right, as I said, I'm from Australia. And what is the number one thing people want to see when they come to Australia? Kangaroos, exactly, kangaroos. And everybody thinks that when they come to Australia, they're going to see kangaroos jumping down the street, the main street of the city. So I want to tell you that is not true. They sleep on our beds. This is actually, we are the exception. This is a pet that we raised from a little baby. Her name is Camilla. Okay, on to some more serious stuff that's not really working. Oh yes, it is working. Okay. When I put together this presentation, or when I was deciding what am I going to talk about at the conference, I wanted to talk about something that has affected software development, is still affecting software development, and has affected software development, well, since I was involved in the 2000s and 1990s, which is projects that get out of control. So I wanted to get back to basics. It happens again and again and again. The projects get behind schedule, and so what do? So that's the title of the presentation. My project is behind schedule, what do I do? So I'm going to be comparing 3 different scenarios: increasing team size, cutting functionality, and extending the deliverable date. So I'll be using the data to look at the productivity in these 3 different scenarios and what is the impact on that productivity for projects that have added resource, or projects that have 9 people as opposed to 6 people, or projects that are 8 months instead of 6 months. And my purpose here is not to give you the answers, but to stimulate thoughts. And it's a little bit of a different way to looking at the data. And I've been involved with, using the ISBSG data for many, many years. And I've actually never thought of looking at the data this way. So it's sort of something that I just tried to, tried to understand how can I use it to really in these scenarios. The last thing is that whenever you're using the data, it should be your secondary decision making. It's not your primary decision making. So if you already know, I want to try and cut scope of my project, you can use this information to back up your argument to management, to your customer, that this is, if we do this, this is how much money we're going to save versus the other scenarios. Okay, as I mentioned already, we're going to look at these three scenarios: increasing team size, reducing the functionality, and extending the deliverable date. But what are the factors that I need to consider when looking at the projects, and what data should I be selecting to compare my projects against? So I'll go through what data I have selected and reasons for selecting it, and what the alternatives could be. So just look at the different attributes that affect productivity. The obvious things are team size, project size, new technology, the experience level of your staff, new application domains, new methodologies, and deadline impossible from the start. We've all been in the situation where it's been sold, the project has been sold by someone else, and you know that's not going to happen. And really, it's all about the people know it's not going to happen, so it isn't going to happen because you know it's not going to happen from the start. So there are other things that are difficult to measure. Team cohesion, and really that comes from the project manager and the team leader. If they develop a really good culture within the team, then the team is more likely to help each other in times of difficulty. It's how a team really works well together. So that's something that's quite difficult to measure. World events, how they affect productivity. For example, I know, I'm sure everybody knows what they were doing the day 9/11 happened and where they were and when they found out. And I went to work, and I happened to be on the 28th floor in a corner with windows all around. I did nothing that day. I spent the whole day looking out the window, looking for aeroplanes. So this is a world event that happened somewhere else entirely in the world, but it affected our productivity because I did nothing that day. And there was a lot of talk about the thing. So world events affect productivity. The seasons, so we don't, collect. Was this project mainly developed during the winter season when everyone had colds and flus? And yes, if there is sick leave involved, that doesn't contribute to the actual effort of the productivity, but often people do come to work and soldier on, even though they just sit there and get through the day. So the seasons of when the project is developed do affect productivity. If we have an uncooperative customer that just makes everything difficult for us, then obviously that's going to affect. And the company culture, which is sort of a little bit the same as the team cohesion, the company culture will affect productivity, especially if stuff's happening and we've all been through situations where there's lots and lots of retrenchments. The company culture is terrible, and everybody's just looking over their shoulder waiting for when they're going to get tapped on the shoulder. So there's an enormous amount of factors that contribute to productivity that are difficult to measure, but these are actually, these factors are in every other project as well, so they're already inherent in the productivity measures that are in the database. Okay, what do we include? We could include everything. In my scenario, I've only included A and B rated projects, and that is the typical. We often do, when we're doing analysis, we only include A and B rated projects. We could include projects that only use the same methodology. We could include projects that have a similar range of team size or a similar range of project size or a similar platform or a language. We can play and get down to a very small data set, but then we need to understand, is that data set big enough for us to do our analysis? So, to me, in the way that I'm using this data in this example, it doesn't really matter what the methodology was or the well, in team size, we're actually changing the team size. There's a lot of other factors. It doesn't matter what they are, but we're just looking at what happens when you move from, say, 6 people to 9 people in the team. The important thing is to make sure your data set is big enough. So I've created a sample project. 700 function points, 6 people, 7 months, and I've detailed how many days in the month there for those that want to do all the calculations later. $100 an hour, just make things simple, $100 an hour. So my total cost for my project is $660,000 and my hours per function point is 9.4. So this is my sample project that I'm going to adjust. So the projects that I have selected, we've got 7,376 projects of IFPUG, Cosmic, FISMA and NESMA A and B rated. Not every project has all of its attributes defined. So only 6,535 have the elapsed time recorded. So they will be the projects that I'll be using when I'm looking at duration. 2,029 have team size recorded, so I'll be using those projects when I'm looking at what is the impact of team size. And I am actually looking at the effort phase breakdown, so I've included 1,683 where they have less than 10 hours allocated, because if they have more than 10 hours unallocated, I feel that that is not really a reliable measure of the effort phase breakdown. Okay, let's look at scenario 1, which is increasing the team size. Often we have constraints. The resources might not be available. The project might be extremely specialised, and therefore the ramp-up time, the learning curve for the new resources might be just too long, therefore it might not be feasible. And it will impact the already productive members of the team. So do we think we can wear that? In these scenarios, the increase in the team size, reducing the, cutting the scope or increasing the duration, it's very unlikely that you will be able to have a choice of all three. Often there are constraints and you really cannot choose. You may just have one solution available to you. So, sorry for all the numbers. On the left-hand side, is this pointer thing happening? That one? Ah, got it. I have analysed the data. So for all of the different team size, this is how many data points I have in the team size. And then for the ones that I'm interested in, I'm going from 6 to 9 people. I have looked at the first quartile, the median, and the third quartile, and graphed that. So you can see we've got a bit of consistency in the first up to about 10 of team size, and then the graph seems to start to go all over the place. So if you were looking at the data and you were interested in information around the 12, 13 mark, you'd start looking at the individual projects in that area and go, well, what's going on? And when we're at 12 and 13, we've got 37, 28 projects in our sample size, so nowhere near the amount of the earlier numbers. So that could be a reason for the spike in the median. And our sample project is right there, and that's just a fluke, really. That the sample project happens to turn out in very close to the median. So you can see that there is a pattern of increasing the hours per function point when we're increasing the team size. Okay, moving along to reducing functionality. When we're doing our software development, often there's a core of functionality that has to be developed, and it could be the situation that core, to develop that core of functionality involves 80-90% of the effort. Therefore, reducing that functionality is really not going to be an option. Depending on when we decide that we do need to make some changes in our project, we might also be at the midway through testing and decide, we are not going to make our deadline. What can we do? It's too late to start reducing functionality then. So it's really not an option depending on where you are in the life cycle of the project. And it might also be very disruptive to the project to reduce functionality. So there's a whole different range of reasons why this may not be an option. But if it is, it's a very good option. Okay, again, there it is. I keep pressing the wrong button. For the different projects ranging from, I've gone from 300 to 1,000, function point size. The samples in those ranges are, a good ranging from 124 to 226, quite a sizable number of projects. We've got the range of the medians of 4.2, 7.9 and 14.4, and there is a gradual reducing of product to hours per function point as the project's size increases from, say, 500 up to 1,000. In the data, after you get 1,000, the hours per function point does go up again. But in this case, we've got a gradual improvement in the hours per function point as we're increasing our project size up to 1,000. Okay, last example is extending the deliverable date. And it really depends on your project, the customer. When does the customer really want it? Is it a business critical system that really has to be in by a specific date? It could be a government regulation that things have to be done in time when this government is changing the rules. So there may not be an option that the date could be extended. And the other thing is, if we're going to extend the date, the resources need to be extended as well. Therefore, the resources may have already been reallocated to another project because this project was already meant to have finished. So there's a few factors that need to go in there that may exclude this from being an option. Okay, so for duration, we're going in, back. Yeah. We're going to be extending from 7 to 9 months. So our median hours per function point will go from 11.2 to 13.1. And you can see there's a gradual increase in the hours per function point as the duration of the project increases. I mentioned before that, you know, if you decide to do something because your project is behind schedule during, you know, midway through the testing phase, then the impact of your changes are going to be very minimal. In my scenario, we've just finished design, and according to the data in the repository, the median for design is 26% of the effort has been completed. So I'll be using 26% of the effort that has been completed in my calculations. I think that your own data of your own history of your own projects would be a better indication, because every company has a different sort of style. They might put more emphasis in the testing, they might put more emphasis in the design. So using your own percentages for your phases would be a better indication than this. But this is what the data says in ISBSG, so I thought I would use this for the calculations. Okay. To do these calculations, I'm going to calculate the cost to the end of the design for the 3 different scenarios. Then I'm going to calculate the change in productivity measure for adding 3 resource. I'm going to go from 6 to 9 people. For reducing the size of the project from 700 to 500 function points. And the third one is extending the duration from 7 months to 9 months. So I'm going to apply the change in that project, productivity for the remainder of the project from design to implementation. So how do I work out, and then just calculate the total cost. And at the end of it, I'll have the 3 scenarios side by side so you can see which one works out cheaper. So, on the right-hand side here, previously I showed you that increasing from 6 to 9 people increases your hours per function point from 10.3 to 15.5. So that calculates out at an increase of 51%. Worsening the productivity by 51%. So our project had an hours per function point of 9.4, and I am going to increase that by 51% to arrive at our new productivity rate of 14.2. So working out the cost of the project to the end of design, my project's 700 function points, my original hours per function point 9.4 times my hourly rate times the percentage effort to the end of design works out at 171,000. When I apply my new productivity rate of 14.2 for the remainder of the effort, 74%, that's my cost for the remainder of that project, 735,560, and the total cost is 906,640,000. And our original project was 660,000, so we've gone up by 250 something thousand. Right, I know there's a lot of numbers. Next scenario. Reducing 200 function points. The start, exactly the same, because we're going to the end of design. Now we're going to reduce our project from 700 to 500 function points. So our productivity will improve. It'll go from 8.9 to 7.9 hours per function point. That's an improvement of 11%. So I'm going to take 11% off our 9.4, which was our original productivity measure, arriving at our new productivity measure of 8.4. applying that new productivity measure 8.4 to the remainder of the project, 74%, equals 310,000. So at the end of our implementation, we've delivered a project of 500 function points, but we still need to deliver another 200 function points to compare apples with apples. So our additional project that's going to be after this project needs to be completed, and I estimated an hourly rate of, a productivity rate of 10 hours per function point because it's a smaller project. Therefore, it's highly likely to have a slightly better hours per function point. So that comes out at 200,000. Add them all up. So our total project cost was 681,880. That's only gone up 21,000 from our 660,000. Final scenario. We are extending our duration from 7 months to 9 months. So our median hours per function point was 11.2 for 7 months, and it's going up to 13.1 for 9 months. That's an increase of 17%. Applying that 17% to my original productivity measure, arrive at a new productivity measure of 11 hours per function point. So up until the end of design, it's the same as before. Applying the new productivity measure of 11 hours per function point for the remainder of that project equals 569,000. Total cost 740,000 to extend the duration of that project. Keep in mind that we had the restrictions before, the other resources available to extend. Okay, we compare the 3 scenarios. So we've got our original project at 660,000. If we add 3 resource, our project costs works out at 906,640. If we reduce 200 function points, it works out at 681,000, and increase the duration by 2 months works out at 740. So obviously the best scenario for the minimal cost is to reduce functionality in this, and in this case it was by 200 function points. So I've created a very simple scenario to work with. And some of the issues with my scenario is that not everybody is $100 per function point. Your project manager's a lot more, your project programmers, everybody's at a different rate. So your calculation's going to be a lot more complicated. But the whole idea of this was to just stimulate ideas that this is another use of the data where you can back up your argument. You've already decided that you want to extend the deliverable date. And so you can go to your management and use some of these numbers to back up your argument that, okay, it's going to cost 140. It would be cheaper if we reduce functionality, but that's not an option in your scenario. In the scenario, just one point is where I reduce the functionality by 200 function points. What normally happens is we keep resources around. We're a bit scared that we might not make our deliverable, so we let the resources hang around. And in that case, you're not going to achieve the same productivity because the reduced productivity means that you are actually shedding some resources, and those resources might not even be needed full time. So what do they do for the rest of the time? They might be unallocated, which means you're not really saving. So that's another thing to consider. So in my sample, I had an original hours per function point of 9.4. So if the project was behind schedule, it means that the productivity really wasn't 9.4, because your 9.4 would be realised at the end of that project life cycle, not at the beginning. So, but we had to have a number to sort of play with to begin with. And all of these decisions to, there are warning signs that our project is falling behind schedule, but the decision to actually do something doesn't happen overnight, and then there's going to be a bit of a lead-up time. We need to see if there are resources available. We need to negotiate with the customer. So there is a lead-up time, and it might drag on and on and on into, subsequent life cycles of the project. So as I said at the beginning, this presentation is just to demonstrate an alternative use. Like we all know that one of the primary uses of the ISBSG data is to assist with estimating. But here's just a little bit of another example of how you can assist it with decision making in the project. I have used everything. You could, I know there's a lot of cosmic users in the room. You could select only cosmic data. You can narrow that database down, but just be cautious that your data set might get too small to actually get a decent pattern out of the data. And I just want to re-emphasise that the ISBSG data is an open database, therefore you can look at the data and pick and choose what you want out of it. So we all know that data is power, so you can, when you've got the information, then you can choose what is the choice that best suits your project. Thank you very much.
Well, we would like to thank Paula Holmberg for her presentation and participation at the CNMES 2018.